well. So Colts losing to the Texans. A lot of people saw the social media highlight of Anthony Richardson throwing this. He slips and he still throws the 60-yard bomb to Alec Pierce for a touchdown. And he had it was a phenomenal play. Don't get me wrong. He had another play like that too, where he threw it. Alec Pierce came back to it, and it was another long gain. If you take those out, though, he had an okay game. There was a lot of where we kind of go back to Anthony Richardson's still really kind of a rookie. He has that strong arm, but does he have the accuracy to get it done? He's a very dynamic player, very fun player to watch. Don't get me wrong. But there were, for example, Michael Pittman Jr., I think, fell victim to this. He was like forcing balls to Michael Pittman Jr., almost like he felt like obligated to throw the ball to Michael Pittman Jr. because he was the wide receiver one or he's extended. There were plays where Michael Pittman Jr. was completely covered. Like even if you look at it from the quarterback's perspective, you look at what he's looking at, he's covered, but he still tried to fit it in there, and it didn't work out. And that's why Michael Pittman Jr. only had 4 receptions on 8 targets for 31 yards. Another issue was A.D. Mitchell. He was someone we were looking to have a great game. And there were people trashing A.D. Mitchell, saying, like, what the heck? He had 1 reception for 2 yards on 5 targets. This guy isn't ready for the NFL. Go look at the targets. For the most part, if Anthony Richardson hones in a little bit on that arm, and again, he's got a rocket. The dude can fire. But he needs to like realize. I almost wonder if him slipping helped that Alec Pierce throw, because it was perfect. And I wonder if it almost took a little bit of power out of it, because there were, I'm going to say, 3 A.D. Mitchell targets that I can think of where if there had just been a little bit less power on that ball, or A.D. Mitchell had been able to be a little bit faster to catch up to it, I think A.D. Mitchell had some touchdowns. There was just too much power on the ball, and it didn't work. So Anthony Richardson, what I want to see from you going forward is just kind of hone in on that arm. Don't go 100% every single time. You've got some talented weapons. You don't need to force the ball to Michael Pittman Jr. Let him get open. You have multiple guys, and I know Josh Downs was out, but you still had Kylan Granson was out there. A.D. Mitchell was out there. Jonathan Taylor was out there, and he didn't get used enough, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute. You had guys. So you don't need to force it into Michael Pittman Jr. Move towards the other guys who they're leaving open to cover Michael Pittman Jr. And then when they move right, you go left type thing. Mm. So that's what I want to see from Anthony Richardson. I think he can get it done. I'm not worried about it. He's a smart player, seems dedicated to the game, but just he's too strong for his own good. The run game was really what controlled this, though. And C.J. Stroud had a phenomenal game, too, with Nico Collins and all that. And Stephon Diggs had a great debut as a Texan. But I really think where the Colts lost this game was the run game. And that's because Jonathan Taylor only had 16 attempts for 48 yards compared to Joe Mixon's 30 attempts for 159 yards. And that just causes the whole time of possession to be offset. I don't have the exact numbers here, but it is very much slanted in the Texans' favor. The Texans controlled the pace of this game. There were a lot of missed tackles from the linebacker levels. I don't think I heard Zaire Franklin's name hardly ever when it came to the Colts linebackers, which sucked because the Bengals had the same exact issue with missed tackles, which some of that can just be because they're not practicing contact during the offseason. Maybe they're a little rusty. That's fine. I'm not going to freak out about that yet. But I don't understand how you have arguably a top 3 running back in the NFL and you're only giving him 16 touches. That's 4 touches a quarter.
Yeah, it's not good at all. No. I mean, I would have preferred if he had more for the sake of those fantasy football people out there. But obviously, I mean, even just for yourself as a team, I mean, you have this supposedly elite running back in Jonathan Taylor. Why wouldn't you use him? I mean, that's just me. I mean, I feel like in a lot of these circumstances when it comes to some of these players and these coaches and these offensive coordinators aren't using these players, or even defensive coordinators, I guess, to an extent. I mean, they're not using them, and then you wonder why you lose. Now, I mean, there's a lot more to it why the Colts lost. I mean, you've already kind of elaborated on that, but also it's kind of frustrating because could if they would have done something differently, maybe not a pass play, and they would have ran the ball with Jonathan Taylor, did a screen to Jonathan Taylor, or did just something else with Jonathan Taylor, would they have been in more of a position to win? I mean, you got to ask yourself that. I mean, I've been wondering that about a lot of players just throughout the last couple of years. You know, I mean, you talk about that with Arthur Smith, Kyle Pitts. I mean, we'll talk about this. Kyle Pitts had a touchdown, you know, in the Steelers-Falcons game, but he barely got any touches last year, and he was supposed to be like a huge tight end, you know. I don't want to say generational tight end, but he was supposed to be a really good tight end.
But he was drafted, I think, 5th overall in the 2021 draft. He was supposed to be a generational tight end.
Oh, so there you go. So I stand corrected. He was supposed to be a generational. But the point being is,
right.
but moving from that back to this situation, I mean, Jonathan Taylor has shown what he can do, especially when he's healthy. Obviously, injuries have plagued him over the last couple of years. But as we have mentioned and alluded to on the show multiple times and talked about all throughout the offseason and leading into this first week of the NFL season, we've mentioned that Jonathan Taylor isn't going into this offseason hurt. He's coming in fully 100% healthy. You don't have to be concerned about using Jonathan Taylor, Indianapolis. He's fine. He's going to be good. And so I 100% agree with that. I mean, that is absolutely absurd.
And it helps out the passing game too, because when you have, and Shane Steichen knows this, most people know this. This is just obvious. When you have a good run game, it helps out the pass game because then the defense has to cover both. They can't play one-dimensional football then. And that's what the defense is constantly trying to force the team to do. Which is kind of what the Rams were forced into doing by the Lions defense. And we'll talk about that here in a minute as well. But why, when you have Jonathan Taylor, you're struggling at times in the passing game, run the ball, get the run game going, and then when they start moving their guys forward to stop the run game, that's when you go over the top to Michael Pittman Jr. That's when you go over the top to A.D. Mitchell. Even if it's a quick throw, it may not be a fun, big play type thing, but even if it's just like a quick 10-yard pass, that can be huge because then the defensive coordinator has to adjust. They've got to cover the flat, but they also have to cover the deep ball. They also have to cover the gaps for the run game. And I looked it up here. The Colts had the ball for 20 minutes of the game compared to the Texans 40. That means the Texans had possession of the ball for almost 3/4 of football in that game. And I think a lot of that has to do with the run game. So, Indianapolis Colts. Going into this game against the Packers, you know that Malik Willis is starting. You know that Jaden Reed had a great game with Jordan Love. Malik Willis does not scare me. We saw they were trying to hype him up at the end of the game in Brazil on Friday. And they were saying, hey, look, he's going to come out. He's got this huge opportunity to come out, make a Hail Mary pass, and he just flopped. He just did. I have never been on the Malik Willis hype train. Even back before he was drafted, I couldn't see why he was even being projected as a first-round guy.
Malik Willis.
And that's no hate to like him as a person. It just didn't make sense to me. I think he got way too hyped up, and him. I think
that whole entire quarterback class, though. I mean, we've talked about this. The best quarterback out of that class was Brock Purdy, and you know,
right.
I mean, so
and he was a seventh round Mr. Irrelevant. So
yeah. So I mean, go figure. But yeah, I remember us talking about him.
You know, the Packers are going to have to go to the run game with Josh Jacobs. You know that already. Are they going to try to make some passes? Yes. But they're going to try to control this ball game and keep it a low-scoring game so that their offense can needs to put up as few points as possible to win. What the Colts need to come out and do is, yes, make some dynamic plays, do some passes, but run the ball, man. You have Jonathan Taylor. Why is Jonathan Taylor getting 16 touches a game? That is unacceptable if I'm a Colts fan.
No, I agree. I agree, and I'm not a Colts fan. I mean, you're closer to Indianapolis than I am. I'm 5.5 hours. You're probably like 2.
If we go into this Packers game as the Indianapolis Colts and Jonathan Taylor is still getting 16 touches a game, I would be livid.
I'd be dropping,
especially if they
Taylor
lose
in fantasy, guys. No, I'm playing.
but that's my expectation for the Colts going up against the Packers. Is Jonathan Taylor needs to have the ball. Yes, Anthony Richardson can do some stuff, hone in that arm, work on that against this Packers. Packers have very good corners though as well. So even before this, you should have been planning on a run-based scheme, in my opinion, because the Packers corners are overlooked, but they're very good. So those are my thoughts.